Millionaire mocked his ugly secretary, but one dinner changed everything. Mr. Harrington was a ruthless millionaire, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper suits. In his glass tower, he ruled with arrogance, and few dared to look him in the eye. His secretary, Clara, was the only one who braved his moods. She was quiet, plain, and often the subject of whispered ridicule among the staff. "Why does he keep her around?" they'd sneer. To them, she was invisible. To him, she was merely efficient. Clara wore oversized glasses, muted clothes, and always tied her hair into a messy bun. She never sought attention, blending into the background of Harrington's glamorous world. At meetings, when investors brought along polished women with perfect smiles, Harrington would almost feel embarrassed sitting next to Clara's modest presence. Yet, despite her unremarkable appearance, she never missed a detail, never made a mistake. One Friday afternoon, as Harrington prepared for a high-profile dinner with elite partners, his usual companion and elegant PR consultant canceled last minute. Annoyed, he looked around the office. "Clara," he barked, "clear your schedule. You're coming with me tonight." The entire staff froze, then snickered behind their screens. Clara to a millionaire's dinner. It was unthinkable. She swallowed hard, but simply nodded. The moment Harrington left, whispers filled the room. "Can you imagine her in that crowd?" One intern scoffed. Another chuckled. "She'd probably trip over her cheap shoes." Clara heard every word. That night, as she walked home, their cruel laughter echoed in her mind. She stared at her reflection in a store window. Was she really as hideous as they thought? She sighed, gripping her worn handbag tighter. At home, Clara opened a dusty wardrobe. Inside hung one dress she hadn't worn in years, a deep emerald green that her late mother had once insisted brought out her eyes. She hesitated. Could she dare wear it? For so long, she had hidden herself under dull layers, afraid of judgment. But something stirred in her a quiet defiance. She decided tomorrow they would see her differently. The evening of the dinner arrived. Harrington's car pulled up, and he tapped his watch impatiently. "Don't make me regret this, Clara," he muttered. But when she stepped out of her apartment, his breath caught for the first time in years. Clara wore the emerald dress, her hair cascading in waves, her glasses replaced by subtle makeup that highlighted her soft features. She was unrecognizable. At the restaurant, chandeliers glistened and powerful figures turned their heads as Clara entered beside Harrington. Conversations stilled. The secretary they once mocked now moved with quiet grace, her presence commanding attention. Harrington, for once, felt small in her shadow. He kept stealing glances at her, puzzled by the transformation. "How did I never see her before?" he thought. He was seated at the long mahogany table. Partners exchanged whispers. One man leaned toward Harrington, smirking. "And who is this stunning lady? Certainly not the secretary you keep hidden away." Harrington flushed, unsure what to say. Clara simply smiled, extending her hand with calm confidence. "Clara Bennett." "It's a pleasure." The man shook her hand, impressed. Harrington couldn't look away. Throughout the dinner, Clara surprised everyone. She spoke with intelligence, weaving in insights from years of quietly observing boardroom discussions. Investors leaned closer, intrigued by her depth and poise. Harrington watched, astonished. The woman he had dismissed as ordinary was outshining even him, commanding a respect he had never granted her. His pride mixed with something else, something uncomfortably like admiration. As dessert arrived, a rival CEO raised his glass toward Clara to beauty and brains, he declared, eyes glinting. Harrington bristled, feeling protective in a way he didn't expect. Clara simply laughed softly, deflecting the attention with elegance. Harrington realized then she wasn't just a secretary. She was extraordinary. And he was the fool who had never noticed until now. The ride back from the dinner was silent at first. Harrington kept glancing at Clara, who sat composed, looking out the window. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You surprised me tonight," he admitted, the words foreign on his tongue. Clara smiled faintly. "You never really looked, Mr. Harrington." That simple sentence cut through him deeper than he expected. At the office on Monday, rumors spread like wildfire. Pictures from the dinner had leaked, showing Clara in her emerald dress. The same coworkers who once mocked her now stared in disbelief. Some whispered jealousy, others awe. Clara, however, ignored them all. She walked with quiet confidence, her transformation no longer something she hid. Harrington began to notice things he had overlooked. The way Clara's eyes lit up when she spoke of literature. The kindness she showed to the janitor, remembering his sick wife's name. The quiet strength in her posture. For years, he had been surrounded by models and socialites, but none carried the depth she had. It unsettled him. That week, Harrington invited Clara into a strategy meeting. Executives smirked at first. What could a secretary possibly contribute? But when Clara offered a sharp observation about market trends, the room fell silent. Her idea, simple yet brilliant, changed the course of the discussion. Harrington sat back, pride swelling. She wasn't just holding her own. She was elevating him. Late one evening, Harrington found himself staring out of his office window, the city glowing beneath him. Clara entered quietly with documents. "You're still here?" she asked gently. He chuckled. "So are you." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Harrington felt something rare: vulnerability. He wondered, not for the first time, if perhaps she had been the hidden gem in his empire all along. But not everyone welcomed Clara's rise. One of Harrington's rivals, Mr. Langford, approached her during another dinner. "A woman like you deserves better than being someone's secretary," he whispered, sliding his card across the table. Clara glanced at it, then pushed it back with a polite smile. "I already know my worth," she said firmly. Harrington overheard, and his chest tightened with unexpected relief. Jealousy began to stir within the office. Some female staff sneered, claiming Clara was using her looks to climb. Others plotted to undermine her newfound presence. Yet Clara remained calm, focused, and unshaken. Harrington noticed their bitterness, and for the first time, defended her openly. "She's here because she's earned it," he snapped, silencing the whispers. One night, Harrington invited Clara for coffee after a long day. As they sat in a quiet cafe, he finally asked the question that haunted him. "Why do you hide yourself?" Clara stirred her tea slowly. "Because people only saw what they wanted. They never cared who I really was. So I stopped giving them the chance to mock me." Harrington's throat tightened. He had been one of those people. Walking her home that night, Harrington felt a strange shift. For years, he measured success in numbers, in acquisitions, in status. But beside Clara, he realized success could also mean substance, kindness, resilience. She was teaching him something no boardroom ever had. And though he tried to deny it, he was beginning to fall under her spell. The following week, Harrington hosted a grand gala. This time, Clara didn't hesitate. She walked in confidently, dressed in silver that shimmered under the chandeliers. Gasps followed her. Harrington introduced her proudly, no longer as my secretary, but as Miss Clara Bennett, my trusted partner. The room erupted with applause, but Harrington only saw Hertha, woman who had changed everything. The gala was a turning point. For the first time, Harrington didn't see Clara as someone working for him. He saw her as someone standing beside him. But whispers circulated among investors. Has Harrington gone soft? He's letting a secretary influence decisions. The pressure mounted, and Harrington knew people were watching every move, waiting for him to falter. The following morning, a tabloid published photos. Millionaire in love with secretary. The headline mocked him, portraying Clara as a gold digger. Clara saw the paper and froze. Her worst fear was playing out. She had worked hard to prove herself, but now her reputation was reduced to cheap gossip. Harrington stormed into the newsroom later that day, furious, demanding retractions. But the damage lingered. Clara kept her distance, retreating into herself once more. Harrington noticed the light in her dimming, and it angered him not at her, but at himself for dragging her into his world of scrutiny. That night, he knocked on her door. "Clara," he said softly, "if walking away from me means you'll find peace, I won't stop you. But know this you're more than they'll ever understand." Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Do you really mean that, or is it just convenient for you to say now?" she asked. Harrington swallowed hard. For a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals, he found it nearly impossible to form the next words. "I mean it. I was blind before. I don't want to be blind anymore." The days that followed tested them both. Investors pressed Harrington to fire Clara, warning she was a distraction. Competitors mocked him, waiting for him to crumble. But Clara remained steady, quietly doing her job with grace. The more they tried to push her down, the more Harrington fought back. For the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't just protecting an employee, he was protecting someone he cared about deeply. One evening, Harrington's rival Langford cornered Clara again. This time, he didn't come with compliments. "You're ruining him," he hissed. "He's weaker with you around. If you care about him, walk away." Clara's hands trembled, but she met his gaze firmly. "If you think strength is measured only in power and money, then you're the weak one, Mr. Langford." She walked away, leaving him speechless. Meanwhile, Harrington found himself reflecting on the man he had been before Clara. Cold, dismissive, shallow. He wondered how many incredible people he had ignored simply because they didn't fit his definition of worth noticing. Clara had shattered that blindness, and now he couldn't imagine going back. She had not only changed his view of her, but of the world itself. The next board meeting became a battlefield. Investors demanded answers, hinting that Harrington was too distracted. One even dared to insult Clara directly. Harrington stood, slamming his hand on the table. "Clara Bennett is not a distraction. She's the reason this company hasn't collapsed under your short-sightedness. If any of you can't respect her, then you don't belong in this room." The board fell silent. Afterward, Clara confronted him. "Why would you risk everything for me?" she asked, her voice wavering. Harrington took a deep breath. "Because I've realized something. Without you, all this," he gestured to the glass walls. "The empire he built means nothing. You're the first person who's ever seen me, not just my money, and I don't want to lose that." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. For years, she had believed she was invisible, destined to live in the shadows. Yet here was a man, powerful and feared, admitting he needed her. "You don't make this easy," she whispered. Harrington smiled faintly. "Good, because you've never been easy to ignore, Clara. I was just too much of a fool to realize it before." Weeks passed, and Clara's presence only grew stronger in Harrington's empire. She was no longer just a secretary. She was his confidant, his voice of reason, and often the only one who dared to challenge his decisions. Some employees admired her, others envied her, but none could deny her impact. Harrington himself felt more alive than ever, though he struggled to admit how much of it was because of her. But not all storms had passed. One evening, while Harrington and Clara were reviewing documents, a scandal broke out online. Someone leaked false evidence that Clara had been secretly paid off to manipulate him. Hashtags calling her a fraud trended within hours. Clara's hands shook as she scrolled through the hateful comments. "They'll never see me as more than what I was," she whispered. Harrington snatched the phone from her trembling hands. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "They've built their entire lives tearing down people they'll never understand. But I know the truth, and I won't let anyone rewrite who you are." For the first time in years, Clara felt protected not by wealth, not by power, but by someone's unwavering belief in her. The following morning, Harrington called a press conference. Clara begged him not to. "It'll only make things worse." But he shook his head. "If I don't stand up now, they'll keep trying to erase you. I won't allow it." When he stood before the cameras, Harrington shocked everyone. He didn't just defend Clara, he credited her for half the victories his company had achieved in recent years. Without Miss Bennett, Harrington declared, "Our growth would not exist. She is not a distraction. She is the backbone of this empire. And if you cannot respect her, you cannot respect me." The crowd erupted in questions, but Harrington walked off stage, hand in hand with Clara. In that moment, the world saw something undeniable. She wasn't his weakness. She was his strength. The scandal that was meant to destroy Clara had the opposite effect. People began to admire her resilience, and media outlets shifted their tone. Suddenly, she wasn't painted as a gold digger, she was hailed as the secret genius behind Harrington's empire. Clara, however, didn't bask in the spotlight. She remained grounded, reminding Harrington that fame was fleeting, but character was forever. Meanwhile, Harrington's rival Langford fumed. His attempts to break them had failed, and now Clara was more respected than ever. Out of desperation, he made one final move, leaking confidential company files, hoping to ruin Harrington completely. But Clara discovered the breach before it escalated. Working tirelessly through the night, she secured the system and traced the sabotage back to Langford himself. When Harrington confronted Langford with evidence, the rival's smugness crumbled. "You think she makes you stronger, Harrington?" Langford spat. "She'll be your downfall." Harrington didn't flinch. "No, she's the reason I've finally built something worth protecting." With Langford exposed, the board rallied behind Harrington and Clara more than ever. That night, Harrington found Clara on the balcony of his penthouse, staring at the city lights. "You saved me," he admitted quietly. Clara turned, her expression soft. "No, you saved yourself. You just needed someone to remind you what really matters." The wind carried her words like a promise, and for the first time, Harrington felt a peace he had never known. But as the days turned into weeks, Harrington realized something simple yet profound. The woman he once overlooked had become the center of his life. She had been the goddess all along, not because of her beauty at dinner, but because of her strength, her kindness, and the way she made him believe he could be better. And for Harrington, that was the most breathtaking revelation of all. Clara never imagined her life would change this drastically. Just months ago, she was invisible, underestimated, and mocked for her appearance. Now, people sought her advice, respected her insight, and even admired her courage. But she never let it go to her head. At her core, she was still the same woman, grounded, compassionate, and unwilling to forget her struggles. Harrington, however, struggled with a new fear. For years, he had been admired for his wealth and power, but now he wanted something more fragile: Clara's heart. He wasn't sure if she felt the same. Late one evening, he rehearsed what he might say, only to laugh at himself. "The great Alexander Harrington," he muttered, terrified of a secretary's answer. One night, after another exhausting board meeting, Harrington invited Clara to dinner, not at a lavish restaurant, but at a quiet little bistro she once mentioned loving. Clara looked surprised when she arrived. "You remembered?" she asked softly. Harrington smiled. I remember everything about you, Clara. Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept her composure. They spoke for hours. No business talk, no scandals, just stories of childhood dreams and long-forgotten hopes. Harrington shared his loneliness growing up in wealth, while Clara confessed how often she had been dismissed for her looks. For the first time, they met not as boss and secretary, but as two souls who had been searching for someone who truly saw them. At one point, Harrington leaned closer. "Clara, may I confess something?" His voice shook slightly. Clara nodded. "That night at the gala, I wasn't just breathless because of how you looked. I was breathless because I realized how blind I had been. You've always been extraordinary. I was just too arrogant to see it." Clara's eyes shimmered as she whispered, "And yet, you see me now." The days turned into a rhythm of work, laughter, and late-night conversations. Harrington found himself relying on Clara not only for business, but for the quiet strengths she gave him. She, in turn, grew more confident, realizing that her worth was never tied to appearances, but to the heart she carried within. Then came a defining moment. The company faced a massive deal that could change everything. Harrington was hesitant, unsure if it was worth the risk. Clara stepped in, laying out a bold plan that no one else had considered. "Sometimes," she said with quiet conviction, "you have to believe in more than numbers. You have to believe in people." Her plan worked flawlessly. The deal succeeded, saving the company millions and expanding its reach. The board finally acknowledged Clara's brilliance, and Harrington couldn't hide the pride glowing in his eyes. That night, at the victory celebration, he raised a toast to Clara Benetta, woman who taught me that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the people who stand beside us. Applause erupted, but Clara's gaze lingered on Harrington. She realized then that he wasn't just praising her for the company's sake, he meant every word. And deep down, she felt the same pull toward him. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that love might be possible. The transformation that began with one dinner had now blossomed into something neither of them expected. Harrington was no longer the cold, untouchable millionaire. Clara was no longer the overlooked secretary. Together, they had built something rare: trust, respect, and a bond stronger than any scandal or whisper. But love has a way of testing even the strongest. Clara worried. What if she lost herself in his world? She had fought so hard to be seen, to be respected. One evening, she voiced her fear. "I don't want to be known just as your secretary or your partner. I want to be known as Clara." Harrington reached for her hand. "Then let's build a world where you are." His words weren't empty. He offered her leadership in a new philanthropic foundation, her vision, her name, her impact. Clara hesitated, then agreed. Soon, the world didn't just know her as Harrington's secretary. They knew her as the brilliant mind behind initiatives that changed lives. At the opening of their first project, Harrington stood beside her, but this time he was in her shadow, letting her shine. Watching her speak to a crowd, confident and radiant, he thought to himself, "She was never just my secretary. She was always the light I was waiting for." Later that night, away from the cameras, Harrington finally said what he had been holding back. "Clara, I love you. Not for what you've done for me, not for how the world sees you now, but simply because you are you." Clara's breath caught, tears filling her eyes. "I love you too, Alexander. Even when you were blind, I think part of me always did." Their love was not a fairy tale, which hard-won forged through trials, ridicule, and doubt. But it was real. Together, they built a partnership that was both personal and professional, grounded not in appearances, but in truth and resilience. In time, the world forgot the cruel nickname "ugly secretary." Now, she was celebrated as a visionary, a leader, and yes, the woman who captured the heart of a millionaire. But for Clara, the greatest victory was simpler. She had finally been seen, truly seen, for who she was. Years later, Harrington would still recall the first dinner that changed everything. "Do you know what I saw that night?" he once asked her. Clara teased. "A goddess?" He chuckled. "No, I saw the woman who would change my life forever." And Clara, with a smile, leaned into him. "And you finally stopped being blind?" Their story spread beyond business circles, inspiring countless others. It wasn't just about transformation, it was about breaking illusions, valuing character over appearances, and realizing that true beauty is the courage to be yourself, even when the world tries to dismiss you. Clara often told young women who asked about her journey, "Never let anyone decide your worth. They might not see you today. They might mock you. But your strength, your kindness, your intelligence, that's your real beauty. And one day, the right people will see it." And so, the story of the ugly secretary who became a goddess wasn't really about beauty at all. It was about love, respect, and the courage to defy the world's shallow judgments. For Harrington and Clara, the dinner that began as a cruel social test became the night their real lives began. A love story born not of appearances, but of truth.